Hello book lovers, and welcome back or welcome to Nat Cat's Bookish Cafe. Today I'm here to see if I complete my seasonal TBRs. Alright guys, so I have accumulated 4 seasonal TBRs, one TBR for each season of the year, and I'm gonna look back on those to see how well I did with them. I have to be honest, even if I did terrible, I am gonna continue to do seasonal TBRs. I'm just going to change my strategy a little bit on how I can complete them better in the future. So in this video, I'm going to be looking back at my previous seasonal TBR videos. Hopefully you will see those. I'm going to screen record and I will try to remember if I read them in that season. I have to admit, I'm not going to do a tally on the screen. I know some people do that, but since I might be unsure when exactly I read some of these books, I'm just gonna keep a track of them on my little notepad, and then in the end I will go ahead and come back and let you know the numbers. I do know that we are early in November, meaning that my fall TBR still has time to be completed by the end of the month, and I do have a few books from that TBR on my November TBR that I haven't gotten to yet, but I will kind of count them as having been read since I am planning on reading them this month. Other than my fall TBR, I haven't referenced any of my other seasonal TBRs for a long time, if ever, so I have literally no idea what's on them. I'm not going to be giving the synopsis of any of the books or any reviews of them as I go through. I may let you know, if I liked it, if I didn't like it, here and there, some extra commentary, but for the most part, we will just be trying to figure out if, I actually read the books that I'm saying I'm going to read. All right, so without further ado, I will go ahead and pop myself up into the corner somewhere, and we will go ahead and start with my winter TBR. So this would have started December of 2022 through February of 2023. All right, so here we are. Hello book lovers, and welcome back or welcome to Nat Cat's Bookish Cafe. Today I will be going through 5 books that I'm hoping to get to in these winter months. All right, I will say that I think I have my speed on 1.5. I suck at listening to videos on normal speed these days. I blame the fact that I listen to audiobooks on higher speed, but hopefully you can still understand me even though I'm talking a little bit faster. So let's forward. Staring judgmentally at me for not reading it, and that is The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue by V.E. Schwab. So I have not read this book, and in fact I've put it on my These Books Will Self-Destruct in a Year video, which I will link up above if you want to check that out. But no, I have not read this book, and in fact am so worried that I'm not gonna read it ever that I put it on a self-destruct list. So not off to a great start. The next book is another book of the month book as well. I'm really bad about getting through these books, probably because I don't like reading hardbacks. But this is the first book of a duology. I believe it's also historical. It's a Romeo and Juliet retelling, and that is These Violent Delights by Chloe Gong. So I technically picked this book up, but I DNF'd it after about 28 pages. And I know for a fact that I did not read it in winter. So I'm wondering if I have to add a category of DNF, or if I should just talk about like if I actually picked them up, because if that is the case, then I would have said I read it out of the season in which I said I would read it. So I think I'm gonna do that. So I DNF'd it. I didn't technically read it, but I did at least attempt to read it, just not within the winter months. This book just wasn't for me. I was able to realize real quickly that the author's writing style just wasn't for me. All right, so the next book is going to be my nonfiction of the season, I guess you could say, shelter, and that is Evicted by Matthew Desmond. So I did read that book, but I did not read it in the winter months. So I will have to say read out of season for that. I really enjoyed this nonfiction. So if you're looking for a new nonfiction to check out, especially one that deals with like housing, homelessness a little bit, and especially like renters kind of situation, this is a really great book. Really enjoyed it, and I think about it a lot. Keep the suspense, things like that. I have read one of his books earlier this year and really enjoyed it. I'm sure you know by now what I'm talking about, and that is Recursion by Blake Crouch. I have read this book, but I am very sure that I did not read it in the winter months. So once again, have read the book, but did not read it in the season that I said I would. So we needed something a little lighter, a little fluffier, and what better book to read than Love on the Brain by Ali Hazelwood. I've read this, but I can honestly not tell you when I read it. I know I read it this year, so it wasn't in December, or was it? I literally have no idea. So this is one of those books where I will have to hold off on doing a tally and figure out exactly when I read it, because no thoughts, head empty when it comes to this book. So let's make a note of that. All right, so I only did 5 books on my winter TBR, I guess. I think on some others I may have done like 10. So looking at this, we know we did not read The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue. We read These Violent Delights, DNF'd, but not within the season, winter season. We read Evicted and Recursion, but both of those were outside of the season for sure. And then we have Love on the Brain by Ali Hazelwood, which we read, but we're not sure what season we read that in. So not off to a great start. But let's go ahead and move on to spring. All right, so now we're in spring, which should be March, April, and May. All right, so the first physical book on this list is The Death of V. So this is a book that I did read, but I'm 90% sure that I read this in the summertime. So it was not in spring. I absolutely love this book. It's on my favorite shelves, which you can't see because I'm sitting down today, but definitely a 5 out of 5 star read, just not read in spring. The next book is a book that I would receive from the library. Unfortunately, my library doesn't have the audiobook for this one yet, but they do have a physical copy, and that is The World Gives Way by Marissa Levin. I have not read this book yet. This was a book that came highly recommended from Riley Marie, a YouTuber that I follow, and I believe my library doesn't have an audiobook for it. I feel like if it had an audiobook, my probability of having read it would have been higher, but alas, I have not read this book. I'm still interested in it. I will say that I went into a bit of a sci-fi slump where I just wasn't really feeling sci-fi, so it definitely hasn't been on my radar for a little while. So that is a have not read book. Book number 3 is another physical book, and that is Giovanni's Room by James Baldwin. No. No, we have not read this. I knew it was a risk putting this on my TBR because this book is considered a classic, and I have a punishment prompt for my TBR game that is read a classic, and I was kind of saving this book for that, and I just haven't read it yet. So that is a have not read. This spring TBR is going a lot worse than my winter TBR. At least in winter, I was eventually reading them. Next, we have another audiobook that I want to check out, and it's called This Is Kind of an Epic Love Story. I hope I said that right. And this is by Case and Callender. I have read this, but it was not in spring because I feel like I just recently read it. So I'm pretty sure this was once again another book that I read in summer, if not, yeah, no, I think it would have been late summer. So read, but read out of season.
Number 5 is also from an author that I have read and enjoyed in the past, and that is Recursion by Blake Crouch.
Did I forget that I put this on my winter TBR? I guess I really wanted to read this book or something. I have read it. Was it in spring? Or was it in summer? I think that's what I'm gonna have to double check because I can't remember specifically when I read it. I almost want to say it was summer, but I'm gonna double check on that one. So let me add that to my I'm not really sure list. So that's Recursion, which I was apparently very eager to read and put on all my TBRs.
All right, for book number 6, my next audiobook, I have Well, That Was Unexpected by Jessie Santanto.
I have read this. Once again, this kind of like the middle of the year all blurs together. So trying to remember springtime is such like, it's just spring, which is nice sometimes, but it's also just not the summer, and it's also not like there's any holidays that you can really anchor your memories to in that time. So I'm not sure, but I know for sure that I have read this and it was fun. So we are going to double check on that.
Book number 7, we have The Push by Ashley Audren.
I have read this and gave it 5 stars, but I read it in October, which means that I did not read it in spring. So we have another read out of season
23 list. Next, we have Wicked Fox by Kat Cho. I recently read one of her other books.
I have read this. I actually started the second book, but decided to DNF the series because I didn't love it. Oh, when did I read this? This could have possibly been spring, but it could have also been summer. So this is another one that I'm going to have to check up on. I did read it, so we have that, but I'm not sure when. In case you're wondering, I read like a lot of books and my memory is not so good. I mean, it's good enough where I like remember what the books are about, just not like specifically like when I read it kind of situation. Like it's November 4th or 5th, and if you asked me like what I read in October, I probably couldn't name them all, to be honest. That's how terrible my memory is. So apologies for me not knowing.
For my last physical book, I'm taking a bit of a risk because I'm going with a book that's formatted in a way that I usually don't enjoy or haven't had the best of luck with, but who knows, you know, I keep trying and maybe one day I'll find one I really love. And this is called The Toughest Indian in the World by Sherman Alexie.
I have read this, but once again, I don't know when. Oh my gosh, I'm gonna have to like double check so many of these.
And for the last book on this spring TBR, I honestly chose this because the cover was giving spring vibes, and that is A Magic Steeped in Poison by Judy Lynn.
I have not read this book, and I have not thought of this book at all. It was probably kind of dumb of me to put this book on this list. I wasn't like super excited about it when I put it on this list, but it was giving spring vibes and I needed an extra book, but that is a have not read kind of situation. All right, so we are moving into my summer TBR, which is June, July, and August. Let's see if I can remember a little better if I read them in the summertime.
Unlimited, and that is Psycho by Only James.
I did read this, and I did read it in the summer. I know that because I read it on the trip that I took in July. So that is a read and read in season. This is the first book that I read in the actual season. Well, yeah, let's continue on this trend.
The second book that I'm hoping to read on Kindle Unlimited is Sweet Berries by C.M. Nocosta.
This I also read and read in the summer. So that's 2. That is 2. I did not like this book though, unfortunately.
Books I want to read on my Kindle are a trilogy. These are not on KU. As far as I know I had to pay like $1.99 or something for each of them. And I do own the physical books, and that is the Fox Court trilogy. But I am going to read the ones I have on my Kindle.
All right, so these I did read, and let me think. Yeah, I think I finished them all by the end of August. So I did complete all 3 of these books within the summer season. Whoop, whoop.
But the first book that I was able to get on my June TBR from this list is Everything I Never Told You by Celeste Ning.
Yes. And yes, that I read it in the summertime. So I'm doing really good on this one.
The second book on this list that I will be reading in June is Aristotle and Dante Dive into the Waters of the World by Benjamin Arlie Sands. And
yes, I finally got around to finishing this duology, and I did read it in the summertime. So I believe at the time that I was doing this video, I had already done my June TBR. So some of these books were already on the TBR, which might have been why I'm doing so well. So a little bit of cheating there, sorry.
Next book that I'm hoping to get to is The Unhoneymooners by Christina Lauren. Yeah, Christina Lauren. And
no, I did not get to this book at all. I don't think I ever ended up putting it on any TBRs. I have to admit, I'm not super duper interested in it. I almost wonder that if I do another These Books Will Self-Destruct videos, if it'll end up on there. But yeah, I have to admit this book isn't super calling to me, and so I didn't pick it up.
Next, we have another very summery contemporary romance, and that is It Happened One Summer by Tessa Bailey, obviously.
No, I did not get to this book, so it's gonna have to wait until next summer, and hopefully I get to it then. So that is another have not read.
Or a very different type of romance than the 2 I just talked about, and that is Desperate Measures by Katie Roberts.
No, I have not read this book. This is obviously a book that I could probably read in like any season. I have to admit, I was a little nervous to get into her books just because there's a lot of books in this series, and once I started, and if I like it, I'm kind of dedicating myself to reading one of those every month or every couple months or so. So I've kind of been putting it off, but I am still very interested in reading it. I just haven't gotten around to doing so. So another have not read.
The first is a thriller called The Kind Worth Killing by Peter Swanson.
This I have read, and I did read it in the summer because I didn't read it. So let me see. Well, okay, wait. So now I'm a little unsure because September is technically fall. So September, October, November, and I'm not sure when I read this. So let me double check on that.
One kind of stood out to me, and that is Thanks a Lot Universe by Chad Lucas.
I did read this book. Once again, I want to say relatively certain that I read it in the summertime. So we're gonna say read in season. These I will double check because I have to admit some of them I may have read in September. September had very summery weather, so I may have mixed up some of these, but I will let you know the stats at the end once I'm 100% sure. All right, we are getting into the final seasonal video, which is the fall one, and this is from September, October to the end of November. Like I said, there are some on my current TBR that I haven't gotten to yet, but I'm planning on getting to by the end of the month, so I will count those as completed. I know at least a couple of them I will complete for sure. The other one I'm 95% sure I'm gonna complete, so that's why I feel confident in doing that.
This could be considered a classic, and that is Interview with a Vampire by Anne Rice.
No, I have not read this book, and I don't have any plans to read it. I have to admit, I keep putting this on like fall TBRs and planning on reading it during like spooky season, but at the same time, I'm just like not super interested in it, so it always kind of falls to the wayside. So that is a have not read.
really need to get to because things are just getting out of hand that I haven't continued this series, and that is the Broken Kingdoms. I believe that's what it's called. Let me double check here. Broken Kingdoms, yes. So I already read
The Broken Kingdoms by N.K. Jemisin is on my November TBR, and so help me, I am reading that this month. It's the first time I was ever able to get it on a TBR since I read the first book in the series, so you can consider this read. So I'm marking it as read this season because it'll be read in November.
last, almost like a little treat when I could just read them. And that is Silver Under Nightfall by Rin Chapeko.
I have read this book and, well, no, I can't really say that. I am reading this book at this very moment. It is the book that I am currently reading. I am a little bit over 50% done with it, so I am considering it read within the season.
Up next, we have What Moves the Dead by T. King Fisher.
This I have not read, and I don't foresee myself reading it this month unless I happen to have some extra time, which probably won't happen. So I'm going to consider this a not read.
The fifth book on this list is The Push by Ashley Audrain.
Apparently I just like putting the same books on my TBRs again and again. So I did read this. I read it in October. So this time, not only is it a I have read it, but I read it in the correct season.
The next book on this list is Hell Followed With Us by Andrew Joseph White.
Once again, I have read this book. I read it in October, had a great time with it. So this is a book I completed within the season.
Book number 7 is a well-known and well-beloved vampire story, and that is Dowry of Blood by S.T. Gibson.
So this is actually the book that I'll be picking up right after I finish Silver Under Nightfall. So it will for sure be read this month.
Up next, we have Sundial by Katrina Ward. I believe this is the same author.
So this is Sundial by Katrina Ward, and I DNF'd this book. I did read it within the season, but I only got, like 60 or so pages into it, but I am still counting it as a read in season because I did actually pick it up and read it.
And we're at our second to last book, and that is The Haunting of Ashbourne House by Darcy Coates.
This is read, and I believe it was my last physical read of October, so it was read within the correct season.
We are on to the final book on this list, and that is The Ruins by Scott Smith.
No, and I do not believe I will have time to tack it on to my TBR at the end of this month or anything, so I will consider this a book not read. All right, so as for the ones that I wasn't sure about, Love on the Brain was read within the season. Turns out I read it in December. Don't know how I forgot that, but that was a read in season. Well, That Was Unexpected, Wicked Fox, and The Toughest Indian in the World were all read in spring and were on the spring TBR. And then The Kind Worth Killing was for the summer TBR and was read within June, so in the summer. So the final stats are that 10 of the books are unread. By the way, there's a total of 35 books because I did 10 books for spring and summer and fall, and only 5 for winter. So 35 total books, 10 of those were unread. 19 of them were read within the season, and 6 of them were read outside of the season. So I feel like that's not too terrible. It's definitely better than I thought it would be. So I think I will go ahead and continue to do these TBRs. I think it would be helpful for me to usually use primarily books that are on my physical TBR because I've definitely been prioritizing that recently. But overall, I'm pretty happy with myself, and I will happily be continuing making these seasonal TBRs. In fact, I will be doing my next winter TBR. I'll be filming that next weekend, so you should be seeing that in a few days. All right, guys, I would love to know if you film seasonal TBRs or set seasonal TBRs for yourself, and if you ever look back on those to see how you are doing. As always, thank you so much for supporting my channel by watching my videos. Hopefully this video wasn't too messy, but I do hope to see you next time. Bye!